Okay, it's 6:05. I just want to confirm, Mark, do you have the recording started already?
Yes, indeed.
Great, okay. Well, good evening, everyone. Just want to greet you, grant you a warm welcome to our community meeting for our Glendale Water and Power's Western Reservoir and Bel Aire Electric Substation Improvements Project. I really appreciate you all coming out to take valuable time out of your evening to join us and hear about this really exciting project. I know there's a lot of stuff going on tonight. You know, there's basketball playoffs, and also the Dodgers are playing tonight. So I just appreciate you coming out and taking time out to join us and hear about this very exciting project. So you know, it's at least my first time doing a virtual community meeting. We usually would love to meet in person with you and be able to shake your hand and greet you and be more personable. But, you know, because of the pandemic and everything, we're thankful for this technology that we can still have this community meeting and be able to share with you about this project. And the purpose of this project is we want your input. We want you to be informed of what's going on of this project, and we want you to not be caught off guard, and we want to address your concerns and make sure that all your questions are answered and concerns are satisfied. So with that, I want to just give you a little bit an introduction to who I am. I'm Gerald Tom. I'm the project manager. I'm a senior civil engineer with Glendale Water and Power. And I wanted to introduce the panel here. So if you look there, Mike DeGhetto is our Chief Assistant General Manager. He's in charge of our water division. And I also have Richard Roll. He is our Water Services Administrator. He heads up our water engineering section. And I also have Jeremy Klemick. He's with our SWA group. He's our consultant that's working, architect consultant that's working on this project. So you'll be hearing from him later, and also from Mike DeGhetto later. With that, I wanted to give everybody a little bit of housekeeping right now about how the meeting is going to be conducted. So this being a virtual meeting, we felt that it'll be easier to have everybody on mute, just so everybody could hear us presenting the project. So everybody's on mute, but then you can submit any questions or comments on the chat, and you can do that anytime. And we're going to have a specific time at the end of the presentation for us to answer your questions or address your concerns on the chat. So I just want to let you know that's how we're going to run this meeting. And also at the very end of the meeting, we're going to have we're going to send you an email like about an hour later, and you're going to get a link to a survey. So you're going to be able to give us your opinions or which options you would want to choose, and we're going to explain that during the presentation. And you're also, if you forgot something and you wanted to give us more comments or have some more questions, the survey will also have at the very end a way for you to do that. Okay, with that, I want to give you a little bit of brief project description. So as you can see, Western Reservoir, and there's also Bel Aire Electric Substation, which is just north of the reservoir. And we'll have a map showing that. It's Bel Aire Substation is on Raymond, just north of the reservoir. The reservoir is actually quite big. It fronts Western, Bel Aire, and Raymond. Those of you that live near the area, you've seen it. It's quite a large site. So what we're going to do is, you know, it's been a long time since we've actually done work on Western Reservoir, and we see that it does need some refurbishing and aesthetic refurbishing. But before we can do that, we actually have to do some slope repair work. We have to put in some erosion control measures, and there's an access road on top. We're going to fix that up, as well as a lot of the site drainage issues that's around the site. In order for us to be able to, primarily what we want to do is upgrade or improve the landscaping of the site. So we're going to be doing that as well. And we're also going to replace the chain link fence with a steel fence, tubular steel fence. And so we'll show you what those options are going to be like later. So, and Bel Aire Substation, what we're going to be doing with that is we're just going to be doing the landscaping improvements. So, of course, both sites landscaping as well as irrigation improvements. Let me talk about the project schedule. Right now, we're in the conceptual phase of the design. So we're gathering public comments so we can make sure we put forth a product that the residents will be satisfied with after it's complete. So once we gather all the public comments as far as how they want the project to look, in the way of landscaping and all the improvements, then we're going to go into the actual design phase. And then we hope to go to construction. Right now, the schedule is late spring, early summer, and we're going to plant in the fall. And so the project will be done probably late fall of 2021. So that's the project schedule. With that, I want to introduce again Michael DeGhetto. He's our Chief Assistant General Manager. He's going to give us a little bit of background about this project and why we're doing it. So, Mike, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Gerald. And again, to introduce myself, Michael DeGhetto. I'm the Chief Assistant General Manager for Water, and I'm pretty excited about this project because I've really been involved with it since 2015. If anyone was living here then, we went into mandatory conservation and really limited the amount of irrigation that everyone can do. And we just felt it was really important for us to do the same thing. If we're asking all of the customers to cut back, we thought it was important for us to cut back as well. But that kind of left us with this issue of then what do we do with the landscaping at this site? And like Gerald said, I'm glad that you're taking the time, that you have time to listen to our presentation, because I think it's important to be good neighbors and kind of have the input from the folks that live near the reservoir on kind of what they would like to look at and see every day. And to give some background, this reservoir was first constructed in 1925, so it's 95 years old. And like Gerald mentioned about the road that goes around the top of it, that road and some of the drainage was redone in 1968. So even kind of the newer part of the thing that we're working on is 52 years old. So it really is time to kind of do an update or a refresh to the landscaping and the fencing. And it's a big project. You might think it's, we're just doing the landscaping and just doing the fence, but this particular site is equivalent to 35 front yards. So if you look at all the homes that face it, there's 35 homes. So, what we're doing is a project kind of that's equivalent to 35 front yard remodels just all at once. And of course, we're going to put really more appropriate plantings kind of for the climate that we live in and the area we live in. And, part of that includes also upgrading all the irrigation system. Because when you put in those kind of plants, you want to put the right kind of irrigation there and not just say have the same kind of sprayers that you would use on turf. And that's really why we worked and we hired a consulting firm, Jeremy's firm, to help us with that expertise on how to do that and how to do it in a professional way. And really that just leads into me to introduce Jeremy to really get into the details of what we're planning on the project. So thanks again, everyone, for I guess dialing in or clicking in to the meeting.
No, that's perfect, Michael. Thank you for the introduction, and Gerald, it's great to be a part of this team. Just as a little background of SWA Group, we're practicing landscape architects that have been in business for over 60 years. We are an internationally recognized firm, and we have over 7 offices in the United States. Our Los Angeles office has actually been involved in myriad local municipalities, including LA County Public Works, cities of Santa Monica, Thousand Oaks, Linwood, Manhattan Beach, and of course, Glendale. We are both on the City of Glendale and Glendale Department of Public Works landscape on-call lists, and having previously designed portions of Brand Boulevard as well as the Disney campus. Currently, we're also working with the City of Glendale on the sports complex as well as Memorial Park projects and of course this Western Memorial Site. The consultant team that we've brought on board includes civil engineers, structural engineers, geotechnical engineers, irrigation designers, arborists, as well as a cost estimator. So really, if you want to take a look at the site right here, what was being described by Gerald as a rather large site is bordered by Raymond, Bel Aire, and Western. And this is the substation area that's just to the north of the project. So the boundaries of the scope are actually from the borders of the reservoir itself all the way out to the curb. We will be including the parkways as well. And kind of today, we're really hoping that this presentation is going to generate a little bit of excitement, provide some knowledge of the proposed landscape renovation that we're doing, as well as kind of garner the public opinion for 2 elements that was mentioned, and that's the understory planting that you'll be seeing, as well as what the fence typology is going to be. So for a quick rundown for the site, we don't necessarily have to spend a lot of time on these site photos. Most people are very familiar with it. But you'll notice that there's rewilding landscape, as Michael mentioned. When the irrigation was cut off, the landscape kind of, for lack of a better term, went to seed. And it's just become a densely overgrowing hillside. And we all know the chain link fence is not in very good shape. And we're looking at different photos of the landscape overgrowing, plant debris. You can see what the hillside looks like. And so that's really what it is that we're coming in to renovate, is everything that you see on this hillside. And so as we came on board as landscape architects, we started doing a site analysis. And we were looking at the existing retaining walls, we looked at the access road, the lifeless, for lack of a better term, streetscape planting, the chain link perimeter fencing, and we kind of started looking at what areas were most needing to be either renovated or removed or refurbished, for lack of a better term. There were also a lot of interesting heritage large trees on the site, which kind of lends into what you'll see in a little bit, our arborist report and analysis. But not only did us as landscape architects look through the site, we also brought our civil engineers on board. And so they started looking at slope retaining, they looked at the condition of the roadway, the condition of retaining walls, the condition of the large trees and roots that were affecting certain areas. And of course, with the heritage oaks, we want to make sure we maintain those as best as we can. So we're really kind of, all hands on deck, wanting to make sure that this is not just going to be a blow and go change of the landscape, but something that's going to be able to last for quite some time. And to that note, we also brought in arborists, and the arborists spent a few days out there, and this was in April of this year, and they surveyed over 143 trees, and there was around 155 non-inventory trees, shrubs, or stumps, which are also smaller species that are most likely going to be removed, especially the stumps, or at least ground down. But of those 144 trees, we looked at the trees as example trees to be removed, example trees that we'd like to remain, and then trees that we'd like to be pruned. And coming through that, there were only 32 trees that we really felt were not in good health or should most likely be removed for design and aesthetic, as well as health and vigor, and 111 of those trees would remain on site. Now, of course, you're going to ask me, what does that look like? So this is really what the tree removal plan would look like. As you can see, this is the existing trees that are currently on site. This is the 143 trees. So there's really very few trees in this area on the corner of Western and Bel Aire. There's a large massing of trees back here on the northern edge, and then sporadically we have different trees. And it was interesting walking the site with the arborist and Gerald as well, when we really started realizing it's really an eclectic menagerie of different species. And part of what we're looking at is some of the species that we're removing are either non-native or invasive, as well as species that are either overgrown or are actually unhealthy and non-vigorous. Now, we've talked a little bit about the renovation and the removal, but this is kind of where we start getting into the fun portions, right? So this is what we're looking at as our proposed tree plan. We're looking at adding 112 new trees, or a total of 223 trees on the site. And what we're actually looking for is native and adaptive species and trees that will do well, that are water-wise, trees that will adapt. Obviously, as Michael mentioned, there will be irrigation systems installed, but generally, for the type of planting that we're looking at, that is more of an establishment system and for in periods of extreme drought. So what we're looking at creating is an above story of native and adaptive trees, and we are looking at flowering and deciduous trees, as well as looking at evergreen trees. So species-wise, flowering and deciduous trees that we're looking at using would be the California walnut, California sycamore, the Western redbud, your Chiliopsis linaris, which is your desert willow, as well as the madrone and the buckeye. And these are all ones that give nice, brilliant pops of color throughout the year, as well as change, as you know, everyone knows what a sycamore looks like, turns nice and brilliant. It's one of the pleasures of trying to find trees in Southern California, especially, that show the change of seasons. And so that's really what we're looking at doing with this palette, besides it being just native and adaptive. And we are looking at adding flowering trees. I believe it is, 62. I just did the math really quick. Yep, 62 flowering trees and deciduous trees coming onto the site. We're also looking at evergreen trees, and these are the trees that we're all familiar with that sort of hold the stasis, that really gives sense and presence, as well as screening throughout the entirety of the year. And for that, we're looking at the Catalina cherry, coast live oaks, the Pasadena oak, the valley oak, and the California bay laurel. And you can see all examples of these there, and several of these are on the site already. And so we're really kind of just enhancing that palette. Once again, native and adaptive species that are all water-wise, and looking at providing something that's going to provide screening as well as visual interest for the upper story throughout the entire year. So my next slide, we're kind of going to get into the fun part for the audience members. And this will be where, as Gerald mentioned, there will be a survey that follows up this presentation. And we'll be requesting your preferences on 2 different plant palettes for the understory, both of which, again, California friendly, water wise, native or adaptive. And the first of those 2 that we've looked at is the California hillside. And this is really hearkening towards thriving plant communities that are found in the local hills. We have our brittlebrush, our California holly, deergrass, the buckthorn, as well as some sages. Now, there may be some additional plants that come into this mix, but really what we're looking at here is sort of the overall themology and the general idea of what it would look like. Once again, hearkening towards the thriving plant communities of the local hills. And we have taken the liberty of giving a rendering of what that would look like. And I'll let this kind of sit on the screen for a moment or 2 so that people can really digest what the changes are. If you recall, this is the hillside corner that you saw at the beginning of the presentation, where it was completely open and it was all volunteer landscape over the past few years, for lack of a better term. So this is our California hillside. And also, as Gerald mentioned, any questions or anything that goes on through this, we do have someone monitoring the chat. Please feel free to post those and we'll address those at the end. Our second option that we're looking at is the California prairie. And this is more a palette mixed of grasses that are going to thrive in, let's say, a free-flowing or more of an open space aesthetic. And the rendering of that would look much more like this. So as you can see, the above-story plants and the trees we're intending would be basically the same, as those are really the bones of this landscape renovation. And this understory is going to give quite much of the character to it. So whether it's the California hillside or the California prairie, we know that this is what you're going to see from your front yards. And we're really looking at increasing the curb appeal, not just of the reservoir itself, but of the neighboring streets of Raymond and Western and Bel Aire. So we look forward to your thoughts and your comments on these palettes. So the next series of options that we're presenting to the public to look at is the fence that is going around the property. And that's what you see here. As was mentioned, we are removing the chain link fence, and you'll be looking at roughly 1,620 linear feet of new steel metal picket fence that'll be going in. This first of three options that we have to present today is a 3-rail commercial style classic. As you can see, what they mean by 3-rail is there's a bottom rail along with 2 top rails through the picket. So that is our option number A. Our option B is a 2-rail, more of an industrial style metal picket fence. As you can see here, there's a single rail at the top and a single rail at the bottom, as opposed to 2 rails at the top. And the third option that we are looking at today is what's called the fancy fence company, and they call it their invisible fence. And this is definitely a more costly option. As you can see, there are no rails, and what that involves is that there needs to be a concrete curb that all of these are poured and set into. All of the pickets are then embedded. And whether it's this exact invisible fence company or something that's similar, obviously we want to make sure we're using all of our money wisely in order to really enhance the landscape. That would be your third option, C. And I know it's short and sweet. I almost feel like with the amount of time that we've all spent on this since February, that it went a little fast. But we're definitely happy to start looking at any questions in a moment. The last thing that I'm presenting you today is the Bel Aire and electric substation area. And it was brought up at the beginning of the presentation that it is the northern side. And what we're looking at here is enhancing the landscape right in front of the substation, which is this portion that you see here. So we're proposing to remove one of the trees that is no longer thriving, replacing that with an oak, putting 3 California Bay laurels in front of the wall that you see there. And the understory would mimic or be the same as whichever, whether it's the California hillside or the California prairie, whichever of those 2 options is preferred by you. So with that, I will go ahead and kind of open it up to questions. I know Ryan's been monitoring those. I don't know if we've received any, Ryan, have we?
Hello, everyone. Yes, we've actually received a couple. I've been fielding some of the more technical questions just on the platform. First, Linda would like to say thank you for providing this meeting. And for all those that are in attendance, feel free to type in your questions now. The first one we have is from Alex. Which understory option provides the most benefit to native wildlife, birds, butterflies, etc.?
So I would think that the most beneficial option for native wildlife, it depends on which type of wildlife you're looking for. Both of them will bring birds and insects as well, and insects follow birds with that. So I really think, though, that you would probably be looking at the California hillside, would bring a little bit more of birds and butterflies because it has more of a flowering palette in it, whereas the grasses is more of an ever-changing palette. I hope that makes sense.
I think it does. Second question comes from Marga Hall, who says, will any existing mature trees or brush be removed?
Yes, we showed that slide a little bit earlier, and the existing trees that we're looking at removing, and we can delve into that a little bit more if there's a desire, but there are a lot of trees on site that are either non-native or are invasive, and some of those are the, if I recall correctly, it is the Brazilian pepper tree is one of those that we're looking at removing, as well as there are some trees that are not thriving or failing. So really, we went through the arborist report and they graded trees on a grade of A through F regarding how and what their healths were. And what we looked at was kind of anything that was graded down as a D or an F, which means it's either a danger through limb falling, or it had large cankers and it is in a non-thriving condition, or it has passed its prime. But of the 143 trees that were reviewed, less than, so about 20%, so that's 32 of the trees were being looked at. So less than 20% of those are actually being removed for that. And we are bringing in an additional native adaptive species that are going to be varying heights, varying growth size. Obviously, a oak tree, an evergreen oak tree gets a lot larger and provides a lot of shade as well as evergreen presence. Whereas when we're looking at, let's say, a California redbud, they're a little bit smaller and they provide flower and visual interest. But we're adding another 112 trees. So at the end of the day, you will have, if there were 143 before, and you're now going to have 223, you will have another 80 plus trees on the site at least than you did previously. I hope that helps. Trying to do quick math while we're talking, but you will have a greater count of trees that are better for the environment at the end of the day.
The next question comes from Alex. What is the cost difference between fence A/B and fence C? If we prefer fence C, what project amenities would be sacrificed to be within budget?
So that is definitely something to look into. We're hopeful at this point. We have done some initial cost estimating for this, and we're hopeful that whichever fence option was chosen, that no project amenities would be affected through it. And of course, that comes down to what the decisions are. If it means that maybe some species or plants go in a little bit smaller, then that might be the case. But we're not looking at really reducing the scale and scope of this in any way. And Gerald might be able to speak to that a little bit as well.
Yeah, we, as you know, this is being a city project, so we have to get all the budgeting. We have a budget for this project, and if we need to, we have in the past appropriated money through council, but this is always a council decision. So I can't speak for the council. They will approve any appropriation request, but that is possible. We can. And so maybe Michael DeGhetto, if you want to chime in on that a little bit.
Yeah, Gerald, I mean, since this is sort of the first time we're doing this really in 50 years, and really there was a planting plan from 95 years ago as well. We're going to try and do all of it. It's sort of like, we're going to do this and then it'll be generations after us, maybe that have to redo it at some point. Of course, we'll maintain it as we go. And the question about the fence, when we get closer in the detailed design and a sharper cost estimate, if everyone says that they like that other fence better, but we think there's a big cost difference, we could always really have two bid items as well. We could have both of those fences listed, or maybe one of them listed as an option, and then we could let the bidders know up front, because it's got to be fair for the bidders. It's like, depending on how the overall cost comes out, we may end up getting the less expensive option. But like Gerald mentioned, if we do get to that place, that's something that we could give, council the ability to kind of make that decision at that point when we bring the project in. We would say, hey, the customers really liked this more expensive fence, and really here's the cost difference. So we could put the less expensive fence in and meet our security needs, or if we're all in agreement that this makes sense, do this now because it'll be like the one time that we're going to do it for a long time. Let's go ahead and, like Gerald said, appropriate a little bit more if that's what it takes. And of course, we haven't got the bid. We haven't got the bids in yet. So.
And to kind of follow up a little bit as well, one thing, and I do have control of this slideshow. So one thing to mention is that originally the idea behind the fence, so it is an 8-foot tall steel fence. And what we're looking at kind of matching is the design aesthetic of the Spanish Revival pump station that exists here. So this pump station building with the Spanish tile and its fencing is kind of what the original idea behind going with a picket iron fencing. So both of these options, option A and option B, are to match, and they match a little bit more aesthetically with the style of the fence and this building that's here. Option C, it's a little bit more modern and it will be a little bit more open, but that's why we want to put this out to the people that will be looking at this fence every day. It's really more of a design aesthetic choice, and we feel that all three would work well for the project, whether it is a double rail, a triple rail, or the invisible fence. That's kind of why we're having this meeting.
While we're on the topic of fence, we had some comments come in. First from Linda, who says, the photo of option 3 fencing concerns me for safety as it is open from top to bottom and children as well as wildlife sneaks through. I do like the first and second option. Another comment from Linda about fences says the open post just worries me. And an additional comment from Ralph says, I would like to know the cost of each fence option before offering my preference.
I believe that when we looked at this, and obviously prices change from day to day, I believe it was around, and Ryan may correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was around $120 a linear foot for the first option, $140 for the next, or those two may have been swapped. And then the second option was not double, but nearly double that when it comes in. And that's because of the amount of concrete and embedment and footing that you'll need for that fence. So imagine that the first two are pretty much the same and the second one is double. And obviously there's economy of scale, and real contractors have to look at it, but I think that's your safest bet. I hope that helps with that explanation.
Okay. The next question we have is from Ralph. It says, who has gardening / maintenance responsibility?
I'll leave that one to Gerald.
Or maybe I'll jump.
Go ahead.
Yeah. The responsibility, it's ultimately GWP's responsible, but in the city, the Parks Department manages the maintenance of all of the landscaping for the city. So what they do right now is they have a contractor that does that for like these big sites. And then of course, our facility operators are responsible for our sites. If they see something wrong or whatever, they can call the contractor directly or talk to the folks at Parks to come in and do something to fix it. I hope that helps answer that.
And we also have our own arborist. Arborist that contractor. Arborist, is that the correct term, Jeremy? Arborist contractor.
Yeah, it'd be a licensed arborist and contractor.
Yeah, that's what we have. We manage that contract. So just let everybody know, as far as trees, we manage it, but Parks manages the landscaping and irrigation.
And also one thing just to mention about the irrigation, I know a lot of people think when we're looking at native or adaptive plants, they start thinking immediately towards drip systems, which are notoriously difficult to maintain, and that would not be the case for this project. We would be looking at micro sprays, and of course, we are in California. There is a model water efficient landscape ordinance, so we are limited towards the amount of water. That's our maximum applied water allowance that you're allowed to have on any given site, and we would be complying with all of those regulations. But not using drip, so rodents and things are not going to eat it. So that's a good maintenance thing for Michael and Gerald's team.
All right, the next question is regarding the Scout House. Is the Scout House remaining and will it be landscaped? Question comes from Lawrence.
Hi, this is Mike Togetto again. Yeah, right now the Boy Scout house is remaining, but that facility is managed by the Parks Department. And I'm sorry, I heard a noise, but that facility is managed by the Parks Department, and I don't really have an update on if they're planning on doing any landscaping on that. But it's not part of this project. We're just focusing on those GWP facilities.
The next question comes from Carmen. What is going to be done with the sidewalk where the grass was removed?
So Carmen, that's an excellent question, and I know my presentation went rather quickly as well, but we will be including in between the sidewalk and the curb, which is considered the parkway area, and that area will be being re-landscaped. And I can actually even go up towards part of this presentation as well, where we're showing the proposed tree plan. So the median planting will also be, whatever planting that we're utilizing in the understory, that will be coming up in the medians. And we're also proposing for new trees, we are also proposing on the Raymond Avenue in between the palm trees to blend with what's already existing and going on Raymond Avenue and having oak trees in between the palms. So I hope that helps. We are also adding new trees along Bel Air Drive in this parkway as well.
So Jeremy, there is a difference in the parkway planting between the two options. They match the understory for that option?
Correct. Yeah, the parkway will match the understory option, whichever, whether it's the hillside or the prairie, the parkway will match with that. It'll be drawn from the same palette.
A follow-up question, since we're on the parkways, this one comes from Alex. I support tree planting from the parkway 100%. In order to be more climate resilient, we need to maximize shade in our public right-of-way. Question is, are the proposed parkway trees tall shade trees or smaller trees? This is a very popular neighborhood for walking. We should maximize shade as much as possible. Along those lines, why are there no shade trees installed on the western side of the reservoir?
So that may be a question for the urban forester and how the plans were done. So as of right now, the western side is staying with the palm trees alone because it matches what is going on the rest of western. So that maintains that aesthetic through the whole street. The Raymond side, we have added oak trees there because oak trees have been added along Raymond as well. And so that's maintaining that aesthetic. And those are shade trees. And the trees along Bel Air are also some flowering and some shade. So there's a mix there. So that's where we're somewhat bound by what is being set up around us and what the adjacencies are. But please, feel free to comment. Gerald, I don't know if there's anything else to add.
Jerry, I just want to add that, the conceptual plan package was reviewed by the city arborist. So just to let everybody know that they gave us their comments on what they would want in the public right of way. So they have jurisdiction in the public right of way. And so they dictated what's going in the public right of way in the way of trees.
The next question comes from Joe. says, is there a way to hide the ugly white roof of the reservoir, which is seen as you drive down Raymond Ave toward Bel Air? It currently looks like Army Barracks. Joe Neary.
I think we kind of knew this question was coming, and that is definitely an interesting comment on that. It looks like Army Barracks, and we understand. So the beautiful thing with the plan that we're looking at is not only does the understory offer visual break between that, the brand new understory, which you don't have right now, so it's very visual. There's also the overstory, which are all of these trees that are going to be coming in. And so we're planting in new and additional tree species and understory. So that should end up blocking or screening the majority of that view. Long story short, once the new planting comes in, we are very confident that you won't see it anymore. At least that won't be what draws your attention. That's for sure.
Jeremy, how long will it take for the planting and the trees to mature when it's going to cover up or provide coverage so they can't see the reservoir, at least from Raymond's side?
Yeah, so it'll be, a lot of the trees will be going in because of the hillside slopes down through this area in probably 24 or 36-inch boxes. We'll probably be able to put in some larger ones along this back of the Raymond side because it's a little bit more flat through there. And so that can definitely be something that gets considered through. But as for, so you'll get the instant coverage of the decent sized trees. And as for the landscape itself growing in, within one season, most of these plants will have reached near their maturity, depending obviously on what size we put them in at. But we'd be wanting to put in mostly 5-gallon sizes for a project like this, something that can adapt and blend in right away. Again, it's all going to come back on pricing and cost, of course, but that's what we're looking at.
The next question comes from Holly, who says, this is very exciting. Any chance we could have some seating options like benches along Bel Air?
So I need to let the city kind of weigh in on that one.
Jeremy, could you, what's that mean, benches? Can you tell me that first and then I'll.
My feeling as to what they're speaking of is we have this along Bel Air, there's a parkway that's here, and then there's a kind of an openish landscape before it actually hits the existing fence. And so they're probably asking, and they can correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, if there's a way to make some nodes or some alcoves along this area and provide maybe a couple benches. So I think, I mean, that's definitely a question for city and maintenance, and also whether they want to create any lingering spaces there. And it may also be of concern to the residents directly across from Bel Air, because that's.
Jeremy, I would say, I mean, it's a good question, but I don't know if everyone knows, but the reason, see, when you're standing on Bel Air and you look up, it's higher. It's kind of like looks like a little hill. Well, that reservoir is an earthen reservoir. So it's supported by the soil. And of course, Raymond and Western are going uphill in elevation as you come up, but the reservoir is flat. So when you're kind of on the north side of the reservoir, it looks very short and flat. But when you're kind of on that south side on Bel Air, it looks tall. And we wouldn't want to modify the earth or the soil there because it's really part of the structure of the reservoir. And if it helps, if you think about it, the roof, but really even the water inside of it's perfectly flat, right? Because water is perfectly flat because gravity holds it flat. So if you were standing, I guess, on, so the road's at an angle and the water's flat. So we wouldn't want to do any sort of structural modification to any of that. I hope that answers that question.
So yeah, I guess the answer is no, because of structural, it might compromise the structural integrity of the reservoir. So we cannot alter it. And that leads to one of the questions regarding bioswales around the reservoir site. Michael, do you want to tackle that as well? It's kind of related to what you just said.
Yeah, I know a lot of times, you know, bioswales and green streets would be like another name where you try and collect runoff and have it percolate in. This is actually a place, again, because of how it's built structurally with the earth and fill, where it's kind of the opposite. We want the water, especially the water that on that whole roof area, to go away. Like, we wouldn't want it to undermine the structure of that reservoir. And having something like a bioswale where if we were concentrating water soaking in there, it could undermine that. So this is actually kind of one place where you wouldn't want to do that.
Ryan, are there any other
Yes,
questions?
there are. This question, I believe, has been addressed, but just want to put it in the record. From Carmen, is there going to be any beautifying around the Boy Scout house? The answer was no, not directly adjacent to it. The next question comes from Joe. Is there a way to hide the 5-foot cinder block wall on the south side? It faces the Boy Scout house of the substation, the sections that are closest to Raymond Ave.
The answer to that is yes, and you can sort of see what we're looking at here in this, the California Bay Laurel. We are planning on planting 3 of those in front of the cinder block wall, as well as a new oak tree. So we are planning on screening the cinder block wall.
And then this question, I believe, is also was just addressed with the bioswales, but there is a lot of rainwater runoff that comes down Western Ave during our rainy season. It brings a lot of water that could be captured somehow if incorporated into design. Has this been discussed? This past year, there was a lot of sand and silt that would collect in the Bel Air and Western intersection. This question comes from Holly. Any other?
Yeah, and I mean, just back to what I was saying is, like, we wouldn't want to collect that near the reservoir because of the way it's built structurally. But I know the public works folks who are sort of manage the storm drains and manage the streets. They have a really good idea of where there's areas with issues, and they've been working on projects and plans to help alleviate some of that. And of course, it may not just be that intersection. I think they have a pretty big map of places where they have issues that they're working on projects to help alleviate. But it's not part of our landscaping project.
Okay. This next question is regarding tree selection. Comes from Ralph. When the city replaced the carob trees with oak, they traded one problem for another. The oak shed acorns that create safety hazards as well as troublesome debris. Please consider this when selecting trees.
So an interesting thing it's a landscape architect's bane in a way is that there is no tree that does not have some type of flower or some type of fruit. And all trees have some type of litter. It's really more a matter of kind of how that litter is maintained and how that is utilized. So there's not really, for swapping one tree for another, there's nothing that you can do to really mitigate besides maintenance. And what I'm thinking that the city is saying is that by renovating and going with this new enhanced native landscape, one of the things that they're going to be doing is everyone's going to be a lot prouder of this. So it'll be something that is well maintained.
We just got a comment from Mary saying the holly oak would be a better choice.
That's the focus, Ilex. Please give your comments. Let us know.
Anybody that's making comments regarding trees, can you distinguish, are you concerned more about what's in the parkway area or what's actually in the reservoir site? Because we do not have a lot of say in the public right of way. It's going to be the city arborist. So you need to really let us know where exactly you are concerned about what type of tree is going in there. So, we know exactly who to ask or who's going to make the decision.
So far, no one has commented directly on that. But we do have a follow-up to the cinder block wall question from Joe. There's a few questions back. Regarding the substation 5-foot cinder block wall, I was talking about the side that faces the Boy Scout house on south side, maybe just 25 feet to hide.
So I'm not sure if that is actually on the GWP's property. That cinder block wall that's on this side is what he is speaking with, I believe, Gerald. So that wall may be the edge of the substation, and the property line may be on the Parks and Rec next to it. That would need to be something to be looked into. My understanding, I would think that their property line ends where that wall is.
And we'll definitely follow up with the parks folk on these comments. I mean, thanks for, providing them.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing that's going to be, that is definitely a boon and a benefit of this project is that the parks folks will have a palette to work with to blend as well. So we're taking a little bit of that legwork out from them with this project, but obviously we have no purview over areas that we can't touch.
And Mary commented on the trees with the debris. Regarding debris that would fall onto the sidewalk, was her comment.
Yeah, so that sounds like that's mostly the city arborist, because that's going to be mostly debris that's going to come from the parkway trees.
And regarding also the parkway trees, this question comes from Carmen. Will the tree roots affect/lift the sidewalk mainly on Raymond Ave?
It would take a long time for that to happen, conceivably, but they will, they'll go in with root barriers. I don't see the sidewalk coming out and, let's say, a modular pavement support system going in to change for that. But once again, we don't really have much of a say over what trees are approved to go in the parkway. We're just trying to get the trees that we can so that we can get shade and things around there, as well as increase the curb appeal of these parkways.
You guys have been very active on the questions and comments, which is awesome. We have one last question, which I think has also been addressed, but for the record, if the Scout House goes, could that area between the subterranean pump house and the upper road be developed as a landscape workout area with a variety of stations? This question comes from Lawrence.
Again, I think that's something I know the Parks Department has kind of been working on that area, and I think other folks have given them comments. And we'll definitely pass along the comments from this meeting to the parks folks to take into consideration.
Okay, we got another question from Alex. Who do we need to connect with regarding the approved parkway tree palette? I think it is important for the city arborist to hear our concerns. It seems unbalanced to add shade trees on Raymond and not on Western. The existing palm trees provide zero practical benefit.
Gerald's going to follow up. after the meeting, right? Well, I mean, not tonight, but, you know, when we get all the comments and, you know, with Jeremy and I think Gerald and Jeremy will probably talk to the arborist about your comments.
Yes, definitely we will.
Yeah, and this meeting is being recorded and we have a record of all these questions and chats to reflect back on. Some additional comments. I think we've no more pending questions, but one from Mary saying the California hillside rendition with flowers will bring more butterflies and hummingbirds. Also from Carmen, the palm trees look right up our street. But if there isn't anything else, that's the end of the list.
I wanted to add that on the north end, there's a portion of the north boundary of the reservoir site that we're going to just keep it chain link, and we're going to not, because it's not really visible, so we're trying to save costs on the project. And so we're going to definitely put the tubular steel fence where it's visible from the public right of way, but areas where it's not visible, we're going to, and the fence was actually in good condition, but we'll look at it and make sure it's in good condition, but we're going to keep as much as we can on that north end to make sure we spend the ratepayers' money, you know, appropriately.
Some last comments trickling in.
I was just going to say, I mean, I think something to really think about is it's not, you know, being a landscape architect, you go through lots of these projects, and we've dealt with lots of cities over time, and just the plain simple fact that GWP is actually reaching out and looking for comments and responses from the neighborhood. It's really heartening to see a public entity like that really wants to improve and work on this project. And, you know, SW is very proud to be part of this process. So we're really excited about this project. It's not every day that something like this gets the care and attention that it deserves. So I definitely thank Michael and Gerald and Richard for getting that going. And I did hear, Ryan, you had one more question?
Oh, just being the voice of the attendees here, I just wanted to share the best wishes from them, saying I think it looks beautiful. I've lived here 57 years and have seen the changes. Can't wait. That comment comes from Linda. Joe says thanks for all the answers to the questions. Alex says thank you. Wonderful presentation, and I support your conservation and climate resilient efforts. Great work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's, like I was just saying, it's a pleasure to be a part of this process.
So there's no other questions, Ryan?
No, there's not.
Okay, so, you know, I just want to remind everyone that there's going to be an email sent to you that has a survey link, and it'll give you an opportunity to choose the options that were presented, which ones you prefer. I also want to let everybody know that we're going to take a greater consideration for those that live in the vicinity of Western Reservoir and also Bel Aire Substation. We're going to take a greater consideration of their opinions and what they want. We're still inviting everybody to give us their comments. We want to hear from everyone, but we want to make sure we please those that actually have to see the reservoir on a daily basis. So we're going to take a greater consideration of their comments and option choices. And also, I want to remind everyone that the survey will have at the end of it, you can still ask more questions and give us more comments in case you think of something later on. And we're going to put the conceptual package on our website so you could refer to it as long as you like. And we're also going to put a survey link there as well, so you can still go there and, you know, do the survey. And we're going to keep it open until Friday, August 28th. So just let you know, you can give us your survey, do your survey up until that point. So with that, Michael or Richard or Jeremy, anything else you would like to add before we end the meeting?
I was going to mention on the survey, there is a line item for your name as well as your address. So please be sure to fill those out. That way the city is able to track where comments and requests are coming from so that they can follow up accordingly.
And I just want to say again, I know Gerald started with this. Like I said, I've been thinking about this since 2015, since the water shortage, and I was hoping to meet everybody, right? That we'd be standing out there with poster boards and talking about this and breaking up into little groups and whatever. But I appreciate everybody taking the time to kind of log in and go through it this way. And I agree with what Gerald was saying too about it's posted on the webpage. So then that way you can scroll through those slides again. And if you want to think about which understory and which, planting, you want to see it again, but, before you put your answers. So, go ahead and do that. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think Michael's point is also great. We know the attention we're here today, and your friends and neighbors, and you'll have the link and you will have the ability to pull it up at any time. Pull up the concept plan, relate the information that was presented today. We are looking for as many respondents to this as we can get in order to make sure that everyone's happy. So please feel free, I think, until August 28th, right, Gerald?
Yes.
Word of mouth, let people know if they were unable to attend today that they still have an option to be able to be heard and hear what's going on. Because we're excited about this. I can't see why everyone else wouldn't want to be as well. It's going to be a big change for the neighborhood, that's for sure.
All right.
Good for me.
Okay. Well, again, thank you everybody for taking your valuable time out to just take a look at this wonderful project that we have. And again, we encourage your participation in the survey. Okay, thank you and good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.